In my mind, there are three main types of EQ pedals to choose from: simple 3-band EQ, graphic EQ, and parametric EQ. In this video, I just want to share some of the reasons why I might choose one type of EQ pedal over another. Hopefully it might help you decide on which EQ pedal is best for you, and maybe give you a few extra ideas on how you could use an EQ pedal in your setup along the way as well. There are also some what I'd call hybrid types of EQ pedal, which I'll talk about near the end of the video, so try and stick around for that too. Let's start with the humble old 3-band EQ. These are often marketed as being booster pedals as well. I've got an Earthquaker Devices tone job here, but others worth checking out might be the TC Electronic Spark Booster, the Friedman Buxom Boost, or the JHS Clover. So why would I use a simple 3-band EQ instead of one of the more versatile, detailed and powerful graphic or parametric EQs? Firstly, ease of use. There's no need for presets or anything like that. Pretty much everyone already knows how to use a basic 3-band EQ like this. And it's pretty satisfying as well. It's like painting with really broad brush strokes. And you can't go that far wrong either. And if you do get some unpleasant sounds, it's normally pretty obvious how you need to adjust it. One of my favorite things to do with this is to use the EQ after an overdrive pedal. So you're giving the overdrive pedal its own 3-band EQ. But remember, you can still use the tone control on the overdrive pedal, and it becomes almost like a presence control compared to the 3-band EQ. So it's almost like you got a 4-band EQ now, which is pretty cool. If you want to go the extra mile, put them in a loop so that they're controlled by just one switch. Another practical and probably more typical way of using these 3-band EQs is as a boost. You can put it in front of a valve amp and it pushes the valve amp into a nice natural overdrive. Especially good if you've got quite low output pickups like I've got on this Strat. Or you can put it after an overdrive pedal. That way the overdrive pedal gets a volume boost without adding any additional distortion to the sound. If I use them like this, I often put just a bit of a mid boost on the EQ settings so I can cut through the band mix a little bit better. I really like the way it pushes the mids in my Pro Reverb into overdrive without making the low end sound loose and farty. There are a big range of graphic EQ pedals out there. You might prefer one of the simpler 5 or 6-band types like the Mesa Boogie 5-band EQ or the MXR 109S, where they're just a little bit simpler and there's less need for presets. If you do need something more powerful with preset features, then there's the Boss EQ200, the Source Audio EQ2, or the Free the Tone PA1QG, which are all 10-band digital EQ pedals with lots of memory and preset features. I'm just going to use the Boss GE7 here because it's a bit of an industry standard. Graphic EQ for me is the nice middle ground between the very simple 3 or 4-band EQs and the more complex parametric EQs. They normally sit somewhere in that middle ground. You've got a good amount of control over the detail of the sound without it being too much of a headache to work with, which is important, especially if you need to work quickly. I'll just do a couple of examples here, but I've got a whole video on 10 ways you can use a graphic EQ pedal like this that you might want to check out too. Some of my favorites are using it to emulate the sound of different pickups than the ones that you've got in your guitar, or getting kind of lo-fi weird radio effects and coctoire sounds. I find those really useful for like breakdown sections in songs and stuff like that. When I think of parametric EQ pedals, I mainly think of the more complex multi-band parametric EQ pedals like the Empress Para EQ and the Ibanez Pentatone. But my favourite is probably this one by GFI Systems, mainly because it reminds me so much of the parametric EQs that I'm used to using in DAWs like Logic and Pro Tools. There are simpler parametric EQs, which I'll get onto in a minute, but for me, these more complex multi-band parametric EQs are what I like to use if I really want to sculpt the sound in minute detail. You know, you can select the exact frequency you want to adjust, as well as the width of that adjustment as well. So you can adjust a very narrow frequency, or you can adjust a very wide band of frequencies as well. The problem sometimes with graphic EQ pedals is that not only are you restricted by the preset frequencies that they've chosen for you to adjust, but you're actually adjusting lots of fairly narrow frequency bands. So the EQ curve can actually come out a bit bumpy, whereas parametric EQ has the ability to make much smoother adjustments and arguably more musical sounding adjustments. I find parametric EQs best for jobs when I need super detailed sculpting of the sound. There's lots of reasons you might want that, and I've got a whole video on parametric EQ that you might want to check out, but one of those situations is when I want an electric guitar to sound more like an acoustic guitar. I think using parametric EQ for that can sometimes get you an even better result than using an acoustic simulator pedal, because you can really fine-tune the exact frequencies specific to the exact guitar you're using, rather than it being a bit of an approximation of the frequencies that you need, which is what I feel I sometimes get when I use a lot of acoustic simulator pedals. Don't get me wrong, nothing sounds quite like a real acoustic guitar, but I find this gets me more towards that sort of sound. There are also easier to use single band parametric EQ pedals that you can get that are useful if you just really want to fine tune a particular mid boost or mid scoop type sound, for instance. The JHS Haunting Mids or the Artec Parametric EQ are both good choices for that. And there are more traditional 3 and 4 band EQ pedals where just the mid band is parametric, like the Electro Harmonix Linear Power Booster 3 and the Wampler Equator. They're a really nice blend of simplicity and precision control all in one box. Let me know what your favorite type of EQ is down in the comments, and think about checking out one of my other videos on EQ if you want a few extra ideas on how you might be able to use EQ in your setup.